Peace and Black Power family. It's your Harlem educator, author, and activist, the Black Liberation Coach, Brother IJ Taimba, filming live on location in that wonderful historical and political village of Harlem, New York. We got a very important show. All of these shows and broadcasts are important, family, because we're trying to teach you the principle of Wukusu, to wake up, to clean up, and to stand up, as Brother Malcolm told us back in 1962. Before we get started with our special guest, talking about his special book, I got a few things I got to get off my chest. Peace and Black Power family. It's your Harlem educator, author, and activist, the Black Liberation Coach, Brother IJ Taimba. I want to remind everyone that you can see our show at Black Liberation or Harlem Liberation School online. And the platforms that you will see these shows on would be my Facebook page, and it would be Periscope through Instagram. Thank you again for joining us at the place where we give foundational Black political education. We bring Africana studies to the hood in a way that is accessible and not over anyone's head. And we appreciate all your support. Peace. There it is, family. Listen, family, I am so blessed and honored to be alive and breathing during this epidemic, to be able to talk to you, the people, to the masses of our people. I want to remind us, family, that there's at least 9 to 10 areas of nation building, of areas that we need to be getting busy. But I will always say this: none is more important than the other to me. They're all equally important. But the most foundational is education. There is no way around it. Nothing you want to do can you do at a high level without knowing about it. Today, family, we're continuing our ongoing work that we've been doing at least since the age of 13, family, and that's educating ourselves and our people to the highest degree with nation building information, not just ABC 1, 2, 3, nation building information. Today, we are really privileged to have on our show our good brother Ramessu Mary Amun. I hope I said his name correctly. He wrote a fantastic book, family. I'm going to show that to you. It's called Fact: Fundamental African-Centered Thought. So without further ado, we're going to bring our brother on to chop it up about the book, what it's about, how you can get it, and its most important concepts. So let's bring our good brother on. Peace, my brother. How you be?
Peace, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing well. No complaints, man. No complaints.
Good.
Woke up another day.
Nice.
Good brother. We're glad to have you on the show. I got to you sent me a copy of the book. I got to read the book, and I have a lot of good feelings about it that I'm going to share. I personally think it's an important work, and books to me can be important for different reasons. To me, your book is important because it provides a really foundational knowledge. It reminds me of Zach Condo's book, Black Students Guide for Positive Education, that I read way back in the 80s. And it just had a bunch of stuff in it, and it pointed you to other information to learn more. And I think the book is very good for that. I think it's good for people who are new to consciousness. I think it's good for people who are in the medium stages of their consciousness. And I think it's good for seasoned veterans to remember, to remind themselves to not get off track. But in any event, enough of me talking, brother. Something I like to ask people is, what experience or what person or whatever got you on the road to knowledge itself, or to what I would call Black liberation consciousness?
All right. Well, there was a few steps in my life that culminated into where I am right now. When I was about 13 years old, I have a brother who's 4 years or a little more than 4 years older than me. And when I was 13, I'm in the middle school, and he's in high school at this point. And at 13 years old, I'm of no real use to the world. I don't really know what's going on, right? So him and I shared a room coming up. And one day he brought home a book. It was the autobiography of Malcolm X. Now, I'm 13 years old. I had never heard of Malcolm X. So I didn't even know who this was. Like, I had never heard the name before. Okay, this is just to explain how miseducated I was in that time period, not being 13, getting to that age as a teenager, and never even hearing the name Malcolm X.
Mhm.
So he had the book, and I saw the cover of the book. The cover of the book now that you find in stores now is different from the one years ago. It was like a painted artwork, right? I'm sure you're familiar with the cover. So I saw the book, and I didn't really think much of it. So now him and I shared a room coming up. My mother came into the room one day and she saw the book and she said to him, "Oh, you're reading the autobiography of Malcolm X." So the two of them had a little conversation back and forth. I'm still not really thinking much of it. I saw the cover and I thought, okay, got on a shirt and tie. He's like Martin Luther King, right? This is my thinking at first. I had no idea who this was. So I'm in the middle school when he's in the high school. And back in the days at the library, you could find vinyl records of speeches. Like you could find a John Kennedy speech, and you could listen to the part of the speech on side A, and then you flip it over and listen to the rest of the speech on side B. So my brother in the high school library found a vinyl record, and it was an excerpts of speeches from Malcolm X. Now, in his infinite wisdom, he stole the record out of the library and brought it home. Now, the record is sitting there. I'm not thinking much of it. Now, he was old enough to work because he's a teenager at this point. And so he had a little part-time job. So Saturday, for the most part, he was gone. So because he worked, he bought records. And so when he went to work, he didn't want me to touch his records, right? I'm a little brother. You don't want me touching your records, right? So when he was away at work, what do? I play his records because we had a record player in our room. So he used to like to buy and listen to a lot of dance hall records, which was a little bit more down tempo. It was a little bit slower than hip hop music, which is what I was used to listening to. So I used to like to play the records on the wrong speed. It was 33s. I would play them on 45 because to me the music, the bass lines, everything sound better on the wrong speed, on the faster speed. So one day I'm in the room and I'm playing the records on the wrong speed. And I did that for a while till I got bored of that. And the Malcolm X record was sitting there. At some point, I said, okay, let me see what this Malcolm X is about. I'm thinking this is still like Martin Luther King. I put the record on. That was easily the most important needle drop of my life. Because when I listened to him, he was fiery. He was angry. He was mad at his oppressor. This was no Martin Luther King. So that blew me away. My first thought was like, why am I not learning this in school? At that moment, I realized as it relates to education, I'm being cheated. So at that moment, I was almost like how Dr. John Henry Clark said, when he started to get a little bit of understanding, that's when the scramble for him began for more information. And so after that, I used to listen to there's a radio show. Medgar Evers College had a radio station that I used to get out here in Long Island, and there were some brothers on there on Tuesday evenings at 6, and I forgot their names. I wish I remember their names, but they had a show, and these were like some hardcore, Pan-African Black nationalists. And I listened to them one day, and they were waxing poetic about Marcus Garvey. So now that sparked me to a whole nother, larger reality as it related to Marcus Garvey. So I started to learn about Marcus Garvey. I started to embrace this idea of Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism. Now, coming up, I used to stay up late on Saturday night to listen to rap music on the radio because we had Kiss FM, we had BLS, we had rap for a few hours on the commercial radio on the weekend. But if you go down the dial, the college stations they were playing records that the other shows were not playing. So I was listening to a radio show out of Hofstra University, and it was hosted by a guy named Jet Force, and he called the show P5, Post Punk Progressive Pop Party. Don't ask me why he called the show that, but that's what it was called. One night he played a demo tape by a local group from Long Island calling themselves Public Enemy. This is before Def Jam Records. This is before they signed a record deal with anybody. And so I knew about Public Enemy. When the album came out, eventually, I'm following them. I'm supporting them because this is the local rap group. Not understanding the social relevance of what they were doing. One night, Chuck D is on the station, and he's being interviewed. And he goes through every song on the album and explains the socially relevant meaning of every song on that album. This is the first album, Bum Rush the Show. They hadn't even done the second album yet. And so these were some of the things that led up to my understanding that the system that we're dealing with is actually more of miseducation than it is actually education. Now, miseducation is when you go through a process called school and you don't learn anything about yourself. I think it's interesting that Black children will graduate from the 12th grade with a diploma, and they will know everybody else's history and culture and not know their own history and culture. Now, I sent you this book right here. You got that, right?
Yes, sir.
72 Concepts to Liberate the African Mind.
Show that again, brother, if you don't mind.
That's
Yes.
72. I hope that's coming through clearly.
Mm-hmm.
72 Concepts to Liberate the African Mind, edited by Dr. Uhuru Hotep and Taliba Baker Hotep. Exceptional, exceptional work. Now, I'm pointing this out because they have a definition in this book of miseducation. It says pedagogy, which is dominant rule, and curriculum that omits, distort, or trivializes the role of African people in and their seminal contributions to world history and culture. And I think that's interesting because that's basically what we got in school. It constitutes miseducation. And we have basically been given a mentality by people who have done everything that they can to show and prove that they really don't like us and they don't care about us. So when we come out of their system, not having any understanding of self, we cannot be too surprised by that. Do you follow me?
Yes. Now, brother Ramessu, let me ask you this. I'm going to read just a little part of your preface.
Okay.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'm going to read just a little part of your preface. It says, for people of African heritage, having an African frame of reference and an African-centered orientation is the key to transforming our reality. Right? Now, in your opinion, so in other words, and even the title of the book is Foundational African-Centered Thought. Right? So you, like myself and millions of hardcore nationalist Pan-Africanists, are suggesting that we need to have an African-centered framework for our education, for raising families, for our relationships, for everything. In your opinion, why is this so important? Why is it important that Black people know and practice their African culture, African-centered culture?
Well, culture, number one, tells you who you are, and culture is the way you do what you do. Culture also tells you what your values are. And that's another key thing that a lot of people miss when it comes to African culture and understanding African culture. If you study European culture, the highest ideal is the thing, and the thing includes money, material affluence, colonizing other people's country, and so forth. In the European tradition, the highest ideal is the thing or the acquisition of the thing. In the African tradition, the highest ideal is relationships with other people. Now, we have in our culture, this is why it's important for us to study culture. We have Ma'at. We have, coming out of Southern Africa, we have Ubuntu. We have Umoja, which is a concept that comes out of Swahili. U in the Swahili means state of. Moja is one, so state of oneness among people. That would be unity, right? So in the European tradition, the European said, I think, therefore I am. In the African tradition, the African said, I am because we are, stressing the relationship between people. Now, if we understood our African culture, we should understand that we should be trying to get along with each other a lot better. We still see a lot of Black on Black violence. We still see a lot of hatred and a lot of gossiping and a lot of negativity among our people. It's because we don't understand our culture. Our culture is what tells us that we should be in accord with each other to achieve desired goals. So we call that now Black nationalism or Pan-Africanism or whatever. But the idea of the foundation of our culture is relationships, this individuality and individualism. This is stuff that we learn from the European. So capitalism is a perfect example of that. And so when you understand your culture, you understand who you are, and your culture, uh, it tells you what your values are. See, our values are out of order because we are functioning in a European-centered paradigm. Because if we can be honest, as people of African heritage, we can admit that we've gotten a full orientation into European-centered culture that has stripped us of our identity as African people and robbed us of our cultural dignity. So we got to get that culture back.
Mm. Yes, sir. Now, I noticed that you are to some degree practicing what you preach. I'm assuming that you were not born with the name
No,
Ramessu Mary Amun. Just like
No.
I wasn't born with the name Ajay Ajamu Taimba.
Right.
So that means you reclaimed your Africanity through choosing the principle of self-determination to name yourself.
That's
What
correct.
do your names mean and why did you choose them?
That's a good question. Okay, so Ramessu means born of Ra. Mer-i Amun means beloved by Amun. Now, I did one of the genetic DNA tests to determine where your ancestry came from on the planet and so forth and so on. Turns out that my test told me that I am a direct descendant of Ramesses III, who was king of ancient Kemet in the 20th dynasty. And so I figured, you know what, if I'm going to take a name, it has to be relevant to me. You understand what I'm saying? So Mer-i Amun, doing my family research, that's the oldest name I could find in my family. And so that's the reason for that name. But yeah, Kuji Chagulia, and the idea of self-determination is to name yourself, define yourself, speak for yourself, and create for yourself. And so that idea of assuming a name to help to facilitate assuming the African-centered identity, that's foundational. That's very important. So that's the reason for the name.
Thank you for that, brother. Thank you for that. And I want to say this just because I try to be fair and balanced. The unity without uniformity. So I decided to get rid of everything white in sight in my life. Everything. And I'm still working on getting rid of everything European.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that every single black that's going to work for every single black person. In other words, I'm not suggesting that for you to be conscious soldiers in this movement, brothers and sisters, that you gotta necessarily change your name tomorrow. Some of my greatest jegnas still had European names, but their hearts and minds and actions were African. But for those of us who decide to reclaim the name, it is something very important to us. It has great meaning. We're naming ourselves. I want you to understand how powerful that is. Naming ourselves. That means our family sometimes didn't like it.
Mm.
But you trying to get rid of our name ain't good enough. It takes a lot of strength to do that.
Yeah,
And
sure.
so salute to you for that, good brother. Now, what inspired you to write this book, FACT, which is an acronym family for Fundamental African Centered Thought? What inspired you to write this book, good brother?
Well, I talked about miseducation, and I talked about the way our minds have been engineered by the system away from our culture. So I wrote the book because we need a renewing of our mind. I have with me, this is one of my favorites right here. Can you see that? Can you see that? Blueprint for Black
Yes,
Power.
sir. Classic.
Amos, Amos Wilson, yes, classic. So now this is Blueprint for Black Power. Now I would never compare my book to that because that is exceptional. And for the people that don't have the book, that's like a dictionary, reference dictionary at the library, right? That's not a little book. Either way, that's Blueprint for Black Power. I would like to think that my book is the template for Black thought because we have to change our thinking if we're going to change and transform our situation and our condition. So it's very important for us to change our thinking. So we need a renewing of our mind, and we need to get back to being our original selves. Our pre-colonial African ancestors on the African continent were thriving before they had made contact with the European. So if we can change our thinking and understand our culture, we can get back to that place where we're thriving again. And I think the foundation of it is this concept of umoja, as unity, because it's strength in numbers. And we're stronger together than we will ever be separated. And so when we try to claim alternate identities, because there's a lot going on right now on the internet, there are a lot of people trying to claim an identity outside of their African identity. And so that breaks up the group. And so I'm not with anything that separates Black people because that makes us weak. Again, strength in numbers. We're stronger together than we will ever be separated. And when we separate ourselves, we divide ourselves, we make ourselves easier to conquer. And we're the only group that have so much in-group separation. We're the only people that are hung up on who we are and not claiming our identity and being proud of that. And so I think this time has been past due for us to begin to reclaim our African identity and continue or begin to practice African culture because that's important for us as a people, for us to thrive and to survive. It's not just about survival. We want to survive, but we want to survive so that we can thrive ultimately. And I think if we're going to thrive, we're not going to continue to do it having this European orientation and trying to function in that European centered paradigm. It's just not going to work for us.
Okay, very good, very good. I'm interested as an author myself. I know one of the reasons I started writing books was because I was so heavily influenced by books I read, particularly as a very young man, and books that made me understand that words can really impact people. You know, I mean, my father always taught me about Malcolm since I was a kid, but when I read Malcolm X Speaks, I was in seventh grade. I was
That's
grounded.
fine.
I was
That's fine.
12 years old, you know,
Right.
and I was like, whoa, I want to be like this brother. So I'm interested to know what books impacted you, as you know, what books really got under your skin and made you think and made you say, I want to be like this. I want to do this one day myself.
You mentioned Malcolm X Speaks, and I had to laugh because I remember reading that book. And if you read the book, you hear his voice in your head. I don't know if you had that experience while reading that book, but the one book that inspired me the most was this right here: 72 Concepts to Liberate the African Mind. I had always wanted to write books or a book because I was inspired by books, but I wasn't super sure what direction I wanted to go in. When I got my hands on this is a little book. It's not a whole lot of book. It's a small volume, something you carry with you in your pocket. But this right here is what really, conditioned my thinking to write the book that I wrote. And then in writing my own book, I wrote the kind of book that I would want to buy and read. I'm trying to write the kind of book that I would like. So the book is broken down in lesson form, which I'm sure you realize from reading the book. At the end of each section is a kind of a review of that section. And then after that, it tells you what the lesson is and how that lesson serves as a solution for us as African people. So the book is Fact Fundamental African Centered Thought. The subtitle is Lessons and Solutions for African People. And I think the greatest problem that we're faced with is the system of white supremacy. Some people don't like the term supremacy, the system of white terrorism, the system of white criminality, the system of white degeneracy, call it what you want. That system is the greatest problem that we're faced with. And so that system is the reason why we see the mass incarceration of black people. That system is the reason why we see racially bigoted police killing on video. That system is the reason why they over police us so they stop and frisk us. That system is the reason why our neighborhoods are being redlined, and redlining is something that we don't even talk about. That system is the reason why they're gentrifying our neighborhoods. That system is the reason why we're being miseducated in school. I can go on and on, but that system is the greatest problem that we're faced with. And I think if we are going to transform the condition of the group, we have to find ways to eliminate that system and deal with that system. And so the book is trying to give some solutions and some steps that we can take towards eliminating that system. And it has to be very strategic and very methodical. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. And the fight has to be multi-generational. And there are
Now,
going to
brother,
be difficult.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I
Go ahead.
just want to make sure we give the authors that impacted you so much that you wrote your book. I want to just give them more shine.
Got it.
We said this book, the book that the brother Ramessu said he read and it blew his mind and inspired him to write a book. It's called 72 Concepts to Liberate the African Mind. This is the book right here. Do you know how people would purchase that book, Brother Ramessu?
If you search the title, you could find the book, and there is a website. The website is the Kwame Ture Youth Leadership Institute.
Okay.
It's KTYLI for Kwame Ture Youth Leadership Institute. So KTYLI.com. So I mentioned Amos Wilson, Malcolm X, we mentioned. I mentioned 72 Concepts book. There was any number of other books. Kwame Ture Speaks. There's another book called Black Panthers Speak. There's any number of books. I can't think of everything off the top, but all of those things, help to inspire me and influence my thinking. And
Now, how would you respond? How would you respond to people? Because we have this false dichotomy in our community. There's people that say there's the thinkers and there's the doers, as if theory is not important. That we just supposed to be like Nike and just do it, right? Without studying. What do you say to that dichotomy? Either you know, that the real work is not theory, is not reading, is not study. The real work is out there fighting with guns and building institutions and whatever. How do you respond to that?
Well, it has to be a balance of two polar opposites. So it's a concept of duality. You can't go out and fight without the right knowledge of self or the right knowledge of what you're supposed to be dealing with, because then you just be a blustering fighting man, and then you got to have some kind of foundation. So it's the balance. It's like my art. It's a balance of opposites. You got to have the theory, but then you got to have the practice as well. And one can't exist without the other. It's like day and night. They rely on each other to exist. All work and no play is not balanced. You have to balance it out. So it has to be a balance of those two polar opposites. So that's the concept of duality. That's my art. You got to study. You got to have the theory. You got to have the knowledge and the philosophical foundation, so that when you go out to fight, your mind is right. Because fighting is not just physical. Fighting is also mental. If you're fighting in the ring, that's more psychological and mental than it is physical. It's a balance of the two. And so you got to have the theory and study the books and listen to the lectures and get that knowledge and information, so that you can go forward to help to transform the condition in your group. The great Dr. Francis Cress Welsing always said, our goal should be to eliminate the system of racism and white supremacy. Dr. Kaba said, if we really want to honor Dr. Welsing, we want to honor Malcolm X, we have to continue their work. So you could read Francis Cress Welsing or Neely Fuller Jr., another excellent book. You could read them and they could say, okay, well, your goal should be to eliminate the system of white supremacy. You read that, now you begin to think critically. Critical thinking, this is another key thing that we need to do to transform our condition. You could begin to come up with ways to slowly chip away at the system. They said a steady drop of water can wear a hole in a rock. And so over time, these different methods and some of these different approaches and some of these different strategies and tactics, over time, those things can begin to create the change that we need to see. But there has to be a balance of thought and action. And I would put word in it too. Thought, word, and action has to be on point if you're really going to do something that's going to transform the condition in the group. And then when we have that unity, which is very important, we will have peace among us as a group. So the unity is important. The theory is important. Fighting is important. Knowing different ways to fight. I'm not saying physically fighting. I'm saying creative guerrilla warfare, because you're not going to fight them with guns and win necessarily, because they have too many agencies that have guns. So because you fight them with guns and win doesn't mean you cannot fight. There are different ways to fight. And so when you study all of these different books and all these different speakers and leaders and the African Center psychologists and so forth, if you're really about that work, you will begin to come up with ways to begin to eliminate the system. So the theory is very important. Reading is very important. You had mentioned in the video a while back about how art and the way artists manifest their artwork is important too, because art is like the language of the subconscious mind. So that African-centered art can also inspire you. I mentioned Public Enemy, artwork, and art, recording art that inspired me, and got me from one place in terms of my thinking to the next. So it has to be a balance. It has to be a balance.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, good brother. Now, I'm reading on the back cover, it says, fact covers a lot of ground and is multifaceted. It's organized into 10 sections and perfectly captures the importance of doing for self and group solidarity. I was hoping because our people can be a little difficult to move to purchase books, right? So I want them to move beyond the step of, oh, this was a good interview, IJ, to I went and I purchased the brother's book. We got to support independent radical thinkers. Is of utmost importance. The goal is to get a group of us who are completely independent, who don't need the white man to feed our families, brothers and sisters, is very important. So when you see brothers like Brother Ramessu writing, look, this could be his whole career. He don't have to work for the white man if you believe in him and support him. And then he can work for you 24/7. That's the goal here. It's not for everybody. Some people got to work the traditional job, and that's fine too. But those of us who are what Antonio Gramsci called organic intellectuals that work for the people, not for the university, got to support them so that they can do the work they need to do without some cracker telling them, I agree with what you said, I disagree with what you said, you're fired. So
Right.
what I was hoping that brother would do is take us through the book. Now you got take us name the 10 chapters
I will. I will.
and then tell us what's the ultimate message of your book.
Okay. So, fact lesson number one is salute to the universal African flag, the red, black, and green. This is teaching everyone from children to seniors how to salute the red, black, and green flag. All of our lives, we've been taught to salute the flag of systemic white supremacy and pledge allegiance to that flag. Now we have a pledge, which I didn't come up with that on my own. That comes from Ron Daniels, Institute of the Black World program.
Salute
It's
to
a
Ron
salute to the
Daniels for sure. Putting it in
yeah,
for
yeah.
decades. Yeah.
Yeah, big up to Ron Daniels. I learned that from him. Before going to his events and his meetings, I didn't know that there was a salute to the African flag like that. Every event I ever went to, everyone sings "Lift Every Voice and Sing." There was no salute to the red, black, and green. So that's fact lesson number one. In that same lesson, it talks about the history of the red, black, and green flag and how it came about through the UNIA and Marcus Garvey. I'll just read the first portion of it real quick. It says, throughout history, flags have always been an important distinction for groups and nations. A flag is a symbol of group identity, esteem, and unity. A flag is considered a special component of a culture that holds significance to a people. So, again, the flag, seeing that image is very important because that impacts you psychologically. And so, this explains the origin of the red, black, and green flag. It gives you the salute to the Universal African flag, which is something I've never seen in a book. Not saying I'm reinventing the wheel, but I've never seen that in a book. And so, the less,
Now,
but
isn't it true that Marcus Garvey was inspired? Part one of the reasons he was inspired to develop the red, black, and green flag was because of a racist song where he said
yes,
everybody has a flag but a coon.
every race has a flag but the coon. Yes, this was a minstrel song that was very big in the early 1900s. And this was our oppressors showing forth their hate for us in their music. Their popular music was mimicking us and making fun of us and making a mockery of us. And this was a big song on the radio, like how you would put on now when you would hear top 40. This was like a big deal. And so after hearing that song, Marcus Garvey developed the red, black, and green flag. And he said, okay, well, in the past, they said every race has a flag but the coon, but they can't say that about us now. And so he understood the science behind a flag and how that can empower and embolden the people to do for themselves and transform their condition. So that's in the book. That history of the flag that you mentioned is in the book. And the lesson of it says a flag is an important symbol of group solidarity. A flag can empower and inspire a group because it gives them a sense of identity. People of African heritage have a flag they can relate to and identify with. That flag is the universal African flag, the red, black, and green. So that's fact lesson number one. That's a salute to the universal African flag. Fact lesson number two is the Nguzo Saba, which we're all familiar with. People refer to it as the seven principles of Kwanzaa. But Brother Ajay, you know it's not something we should just talk about during Kwanzaa time, right?
That's right.
So the seven principles of Kwanzaa are broken down, and I go even further into elaborating more on each principle. So that's fact lesson number two, and that's very important because that gives us a code of conduct. See, in his book, Neely Fuller Jr. always talked about codified behavior. We got to have a code. So the Nguzo Saba tells you what to do. We got to be unified. We have to be self-determined. We have to work collectively. We have to practice group economics. We have to function with a purpose. We have to be creative in coming up with ways to solve our problems. And we got to have faith. We got to have faith in ourselves. So the Nguzo Saba tells you what to do. Now, this section is important because it breaks down the origin of the Nguzo Saba. A lot of us over time have been told, well, Dr. Malana Karenga came up with this on his own. That's not necessarily true. The Nguzo Saba, just like the red, black, and green flag, those concepts come out of the writings of Marcus Garvey. Years ago, there was a, if you search it online now, you can find it. If you look for, oh man, what is it called? I'm blanking on the name. It's in here. But, the aims and objectives for a solution of Negro people. This is something Marcus Garvey wrote back in the early 1900s. And the whole story is explained here. Dr. Arthur Graham, who was head of the Black Student Council at California State University in San Diego in the 1960s, he had the good fortune of being in communication with Amy Jacques Garvey, who was the wife of Marcus Garvey. At that time, there were not a lot of books available on the writings or the teachings of Marcus Garvey. So she sent him some papers of some things that Garvey had written. In that group of papers that she sent him was a brochure that's now referred to as the aims and objectives, or Marcus Garvey's aims and objectives. If you search that, you will see it. So in his aims and objectives, Marcus Garvey said, we need to have a universal confraternity among the race. Confraternity is just a fancy word that means unity. You know, Marcus Garvey was very elaborate and poetic with his words, but when you break that down, that just means unity. He said we have to function with a purpose. We have to work collectively as a group. We have to practice group economics. So every principle in the Nguzo Saba can be found in the aims and objectives of Marcus Garvey, and I would encourage people to go back and look for that, Marcus Garvey's aims and objectives, and just read it. You will see every principle of the Nguzo Saba in those aims and objectives of Marcus Garvey. So that's explained in the book. That's very little known history about the Nguzo Saba. So that's very important to know. The Nguzo Saba is an African value system that can be used to help people of African heritage transform their condition. It acts as a list of instructions that tells people of African heritage what to do. The book says study and memorize the Nguzo Saba in an effort to implement them as primary principles in your life. So that's fact lesson number 2. Now, fact lesson number 3 is the Johari Sita, which basically stands for 6 jewels in Swahili. And now this section I think is very important because now this is coming.
Could you repeat that for us? The Jahiri Sutta.
Johari Sita. Sita is
Johari
6.
Sita.
Sita is 6 in Swahili. Johari is jewels. So Johari Sita basically means 6 jewels. In Swahili, you put the noun first. The adjective that describes the noun comes after the noun. So Johari Sita means 6 jewels. And I'll touch on each 6 real quick because it's more of an elaborate explanation. Conceptual incarceration. That was a term that was coined by noted African-centered psychologist Wade Nobles. It is a reference used to describe people of African heritage that are mentally and psychologically incarcerated by European ideas and European concepts. So when we function in a European-centered paradigm, we're mentally incarcerated by European ideas and European concepts. And so that's basically this idea of conceptual incarceration coming from the good Dr. Wade Nobles, one of our best African-centered psychologists. The second of the Johari Sita, which means 6 jewels, is comfortable captivity. Now, comfortable captivity is an expression that was devised by African-centered scholar Kofi Ade. It is a reference used to describe the idea of being accustomed to European control and European cultural domination and not questioning it. Many of us are, not trying to throw shade, but many of us are still praying to white God and white Jesus. Many of us still only speak the slaveholders' language of English. Many of us, function in this European-centered paradigm, and we become accustomed to that. We don't question it like it's the idea of questioning it is a foreign concept to us. So that's conceptual incarceration. The next idea is intellectual maroons. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with the term maroon, right?
That's the one I most relate to.
Okay, so I'll go through that whole thing then. Since you like that one, we will touch on that one. It says intellectual maroon, community of African scholar warriors who commit acts of intellectual disobedience, escape from conceptual incarceration, which is what we just mentioned, and reject the dominance of the European intellectual cultural tradition in favor of African ways of thinking, knowing, and being. Now, intellectual maroon, well, first of all, for the people that don't know, the Maroons, there was during enslavement, during the Ma'afa, there were 3 types of enslaved Africans. You had the ones that worked in the field, right? Malcolm talked about this. You had the ones that worked in the house, and then you had the ones that weren't too keen on the idea of slavery, and they would try to escape the slave labor camps that we call plantations and emancipate themselves. So those are the Maroons. Maroon comes from a Spanish word that means wild one. And so they considered the ones that try to run away the wild ones, so they refer to them as maroons. Now, intellectual maroon is a phrase that was used by African-centered political scientist Jacob Carruthers in an essay entitled Thinking About European Thought, which was published in 1999. According to Dr. Carruthers, intellectual maroons are Black thinkers who, after analyzing the core of the European worldview, have declared their freedom from European intellectual bondage. So when we get knowledge of ourselves, when we embrace Africa, when we embrace African culture, when we embrace African thought, you're becoming an intellectual maroon because you're becoming a scholar warrior. You're rebelling against what the indoctrination that you've been taught by the European, by our oppressor. That's number 3 of the 6 jewels. And I like that you like that one. That means you get it. You understand this concept of being an intellectual maroon. Number 4 is Wahemi Masu. This is a term that comes out of ancient Kemet, out of the Medu Neter. Wahemi Masu is, it means like a rebirth. And so the rebirth that we should be going through is getting the proper knowledge of ourselves and being reborn in our mind and embracing our African identity and culture and getting back to being our original selves. Number 5 is Ma'at, which is this concept of balance that we talked about. That's also coming out of ancient Kemet. And number 6 of the 6 jewels is Ma'afa. Ma'afa is a Swahili term that was used to basically describe the enslavement of captured Africans and our sojourn as it relates to enslavement in the West, North America, South America, the Caribbean. That enslavement is referred to as the Ma'afa. And so it goes on to explain what the Johari Sita is and who put that together. Dr. Uhuru Hotep, who put this together alongside his wife, he's the one that created this Johari Sita and put all of these 6 ideas into this list and then taught that as this is some of the foundational thinking that we have to have now. This is interesting. In a 1964 lecture, Malcolm X stated that the language and the logic of the oppressor can never be the language and the logic of the oppressed. So Dr. Uhuru Hotep said, hey, you know what? We need a language and a logic of liberation. And so he put this book together to give us like that language and that logic of an intellectual maroon, of someone that's a scholar warrior. Now,
And if I may just add,
go ahead.
that's what we refer to as oppositional logic. This means, family, that the thinking of the oppressed cannot mirror the thinking of the oppressor. That means when he's saying Gaddafi and Fidel Castro and Yasser Arafat are enemies to our country, you should be looking at that differently. You should be saying, wait a minute, if the white man sees these people as enemies, maybe I should do some more research because chances are, to me, they're heroes, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
if y'all, to help y'all understand that, when Nelson Mandela was freed from prison, he did his tour in the United States. He came right by my house over here to City College, and he had Ted Brokaw, I think his name was, some white man, supposed to be real mean, journalist. He said, Mr. Mandela, we have Arafat and Gaddafi and Fidel Castro as enemies to our country, but you worked with them and you praised them. How is that possible? And he said, Mandela said, you make a big mistake when you assume that your enemies are my enemies.
Wow. Wow.
And then he broke down how all 3 of these brothers gave them huge support, military, sent people to fight, technical and military training. So that's oppositional logic for those who are like, well, what's he talking about? That's what it means. It means when they say something and you see these Negroes out here in the media repeating what they said, chances are they're on the wrong side of the issue.
That's right.
Wrong side of it. We should, by nature, be going against what they're saying by nature. So
That's
thank
right.
you for that. Brother, let me ask you this question.
Go ahead.
What is the ultimate message of your book? If you
Okay.
was to sum it up.
Okay, that's funny you should say that because I'm at that part right now. The ultimate lesson of this book is the idea of self-sufficiency. And I say in the book, as people of African heritage in 21st century America, voting is not going to get us to the next step. Voting for white liberals is not going to do it, Joe Biden. Voting to put black people in high office is not a solution, Barack Obama. Marching and protesting in the street is not the solution, Black Lives Matter. The solution for African people in 21st century America comes when we begin to restore our lost self-sufficiency. Now, that means we need to get self-sufficient control of all of our basic human survival needs. That's our food, clothes, shelter, education, medication, and self-defense. When we begin to get self-sufficient control of our food, clothes, shelter, education, medication, and self-defense, then and only then can we begin to talk about freedom. If you pay attention, civil rights movement, they said we want our freedom. Black power movement, they said we want our freedom. No one ever took the time to explain what freedom is. Freedom is actually a byproduct of self-sufficiency, meaning you must first have a measurable degree of self-sufficiency from the system of white supremacy in order to have a semblance of freedom. And so the ultimate message of the book, and this is a theme that runs throughout the whole book, is this idea that we need to be able to provide ourselves with food, meaning we produce our own food, we grow our own food. We need to provide ourselves with clothes, which means we need to make our own clothes, stop running to their store to enrich them, it just makes you a better consumer. We need to own the spaces we live in. So we need to own the shelter, own the land, and education. We need to educate our children ourselves, because the process of teaching and learning, you learn your culture from that process. Not only that, the concept of medication, we still trust their vaccines, their pharmaceutical meds, all of these things that have side effects. We need to begin to have self-sufficient control of our own medicine, meaning plant-based herbal medicines, not what the chemicals that they're telling you is medicine. And it's funny, when you get sick and you go to the doctor, they give you pharmaceutical meds. When you're sick, it's because you're deficient in something or something toxic has entered the body. No one gets sick because they lack pharmaceutical drugs. So we have to get away from their system of medicine and create our own medicine. And number 6 is self-defense. When you have land, you have food, you have everything that you need, you can educate your children yourself. You need a means or an apparatus by which you can defend your food, clothes, shelter, land, water, and so forth and so on. So the ultimate theme of the book is this idea that the solution for us comes when we begin to restore our lost self-sufficiency. Now, key word there is restore. The prefix re means to do again. We've done it before. We need to do it again. Marcus Garvey years ago said, what humans have done, humans can do. We've already done it. It's just a matter of us understanding that we should do it again. So we need to restore our lost self-sufficiency. The other operative word there is lost, meaning we had it at one time and we lost it. So that's the ultimate theme of the book, brother, to become self-sufficient again and stop relying on our enemy. Now, you mentioned something I thought was interesting. You talked about what they say on the news and Nelson Mandela's reaction to them saying, hey, look, we dealt with these bad people and you're considering them good people. I think the ultimate lesson there and what Nelson Mandela said, you cannot trust your oppressor. Trust is the fuel that drives the engine of systemic white supremacy. You see people trust the information that comes across their news. People is trusting their vaccine. They're going out here and getting this vaccine that we don't even know what it is. Trust. If you can stop trusting them, if we get serious for 1 year, we could stop trusting them, we would be on the track to transforming our condition as a group. So you cannot trust their schools, their information, their medication, their anything. You got to be able to do for self. You got to stop trusting them, because that trust is the fuel that drives the engine. And so the engine is running really well right now because we trust it. And when we
Well, I got to tell you, I trust the white man completely. I trust that he gives us everything bad for us. I trust that any opportunity he has, he will rob, rape, pillage, and plunder, misinform, incarcerate, unfairly judge us. I trust that he's going to be the cracker and devil he's been for over 1,000 years on this planet. I trust that.
well, you can trust those things. You can trust those things.
That's about it. That's all the trust he gets from me.
Yes. So the idea is that becoming self-sufficient is the most beneficial thing Black people can do. In an effort to be self-sufficient, we must have complete control of our basic human survival needs: our food, clothes, shelter, education, medication, and self-defense. The solution to the problems faced by people of African heritage comes when we begin to restore that lost self-sufficiency. The goal of every Black person and every Black organization should be self-sufficiency. So if you have leadership among you, it could be the church, it could be religious leaders, it could be political elected officials. If they're not teaching you and telling you this concept of self-sufficiency, that person is not serving your best interest. Marcus Garvey said, any leadership that teaches you to rely on another people is a leadership that will enslave you. So we have to become self-sufficient and leave them and their system alone and begin to develop our own system. And this idea of self-sufficiency has to be something we mention in every conversation. If we're going to eliminate the system of white terrorism, the system of white supremacy, the system of white criminality, this concept of self-sufficiency has to be something we speak about every day on an ongoing basis. Every conversation we have should be about this concept of self-sufficiency. So that's the ultimate message of the book, brother.
Well, brother, I tell you what, that's a most important message. As I put up on the screen, two important things. One, family, those of you watching, if you have any questions or comments, please make this engaging. Don't just let the brother be sitting here talking by himself and with me. If you have questions or comments, please put them so I can put them forth to him and he can address them. Secondly, on the bottom, you see a ticker scrolling by. What it's doing is telling you that you can purchase Brother Ramessu's book. It's called FACT. It's an acronym. So as a F period, A period, C period, T period. And you can find that at Amazon.com. And that is the price of $21. Please don't cringe when I say $21. Some of y'all spend $21 for the most insane, nonsensical items on the face of this planet Earth. And that's your right. But we do say if you're going to spend money over here with non-essential things, spend money to feed your mind. Spend money that's going to prepare you to be the warrior, the frontline warrior, the soldier that our community needs. Right? That's very important. So, family, get your little plastic credit cards out right now. If you're on your laptop, open another screen. Go right to Amazon to get the if you can afford it, get the brother's book right now as we speak. Don't wait. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. Get it now if you can. Let me take a few comments. Let's see what we got. Okay, so brother Quabena, this is do you know brother Quabena? My brother Ramessu, he's a bad brother.
I can't say that I do. No,
He's a bad brother. He's a brother that bangs on the enemy and on our rap artists who push that negativity. Nice. And he challenges the radio stations to clean up the music and stop pushing filth to our people. He's a bad, beautiful brother, bad in a good way.
I need to talk to him.
He asks, is there another way to get it other through Amazon? Can people get it right from you?
You know what? They can. You know what? They would have to email me. You could send emails if you want to get it straight through me and avoid the middleman. Email me at offthecornerinfo@gmail.com. That email again is offthecornerinfo@gmail.com, and we'll make arrangements to get that to you. And I also want to say that there's a forthcoming audio book on CD that's coming, and you can only get that through me. You're not going to be able to get that through Amazon. So anyone interested in purchasing the book directly from me and skipping over Amazon, you can do so by emailing me at offthecornerinfo@gmail.com, and we'll make arrangements to get you that book.
All right, I'm going to put that on the screen. I hope that's spelled correctly. Yeah, offthecornerinfo@gmail.com. If you want to buy the book Fact, Fundamental African-Centered Thought, directly from Brother Ramessu. Why is that a good option? Because he keeps more of the money and it goes directly to him, as opposed to Amazon taking a little bit of cut. So if you can buy the book directly, family, buy the book directly, right from the brother. You make sure he gets more money from his labor, right? And you ain't got to wait for Amazon to do all their fiddling around, okay? Very important. Are there any questions for our good brother? Very good. Mark McPhee asks, when will the audio be available?
You know what? I would say, I want to say inside the next 4 weeks. But if you follow up with me at that email, offthecornerinfo@gmail.com, you know, I will let you know for sure. But I'm looking at another month or so. And the audio book is good because while you're driving, you could play it. If you're in the car with your children, you could play it. So they're constantly getting this information. When you're at home cleaning up your house, or you could upload it to your phone and you could have it in your ears as you go about your day. You're getting that knowledge and that information. So again, if you could email me, I could continue to follow up with you on when the audio book will be available. But that is coming soon. offthecornerinfo@gmail.com.
Yes, for brother Kwabena, who raised the question, do we have to go to Amazon to get it? You do not, brother. You can get it directly from my brother. The information is on your screen. Off the corner info@gmail.com. Correspond with our brother. Tell him how many books you want, whatever. He'll tell you the pricing and whatever. I don't know if he has a cash app, but he'll work that out with you when you hit him up through the Gmail. Okay. Are there any? We want more questions and comments from the masses. This energizes us. When we do these interviews, it's like doing poetry or singing or playing sports. We get energized by the audience participation, right? So, family, it'd be very helpful if you have any thoughts or questions to jump in. Now, brother Ramessu, let me ask you this: the cop, I think his name was Chauvin, has been arrested. Oh, excuse me, arrested. He's been convicted for, I believe, second-degree murder, if I'm correct. He's going to be sentenced in a bit. There are sections of the black community that started having cookouts and lighting fireworks and doing parades and shit. My question to you is, from where you sit, from your political framework, how do you see this? What is your reaction to, okay, they're going to arrest this guy, this particular cop for putting his knee on George Floyd's neck? What does that mean for us, brother? How should we interpret that?
Well, I think because he was convicted, number one, he should have been convicted. I think that goes without saying. But this shows you the power of the people. The people came out and put pressure on the system. So we got a conviction. Now, he hasn't been sentenced yet. So I don't know why black people in the street dancing and celebrating good times. Nothing. We don't know exactly, what the sentence is going to be. He could get 10 years. And because he's police, he could do 3 and they quietly let him out. It's not a victory per se. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm not the one that's gonna have the cookout, and I'm not celebrating good times and dancing in the street because he was convicted. But he still hasn't been sentenced. So for me, it's not necessarily a victory. I mean, he should have been convicted, obviously, but I'm not necessarily celebrating that per se. And then if he does, let's say, get 40 years, the system is still in place. Nothing's changed. So the system that mass incarcerates black men hasn't been eliminated. The system where the police have quotas, where they have to, of course, confront and descend upon you for no other reason except to fulfill a quota, that system is still in place. So the system is still in place. If he gets sentenced or convicted or whatever the case is. So until we eliminate the system, we have no reason to dance in the street and celebrate good times because nothing's happened yet, and nothing is going to change just because he got convicted. I don't really see that as a victory per se.
Completely agreed, my brother. By the way, our brother Quabiner said that he got the information. He's going to order a book. He's going to hit you up on email. He's going to definitely order a book. So that's a good thing because our brother is so much in touch and connected with other brothers and sisters. So hopefully, our hope is that when brother Quabiner gets the book, he's gonna be like, "Yo, y'all got to check this book out, and other people are going to learn about it." That's why we have our brother on the show. We're not here just flapping our gums. The goal, family, is to spread the principles of black nationalism, Pan-Africanism, black liberation to as many people as possible. Why? Because the white man spreads the gospel of McDonald's and Burger King and his cars and his religious concepts all the time. He keeps it on repeat so that you buy into them. So we have to learn from one of the best salesmen on the planet. And we got to repeat our messages until it gets into our people and hit them from different angles. That's what this is about.
So I want
Raphael says,
to.
brother, to what you had just said, he says, yeah, it's nothing but a band-aid. He doesn't take it seriously. What were you going to say, good brother?
No, I was going to thank Brother Corbena for his interest in the book and for following up with me after the fact. So I just want to say Asante Sana to the brother. Thank you.
Yes. Now, brother, let me ask you this. I'm just going to throw a few little questions at you, see how you look at it. Because what I'm trying to demonstrate for those watching is the power of having an Africana studies, black nationalist, Pan-Africanist, African-centered sort of thinking, how it helps us to take proper political positions, how it helps us to protect ourselves. It's not just mumbo jumbo, fam. This is real talk. Here's a question for you. A lot of our people are saying that the school systems, the white man's public school systems, should be required to teach black, what they call black history, and are very upset that a lot of these teachers and principals and school districts are not. Who's who is responsible for teaching our people their correct history, their political education, their cultural connectivity? Who do you think is most responsible for that? Is it the school? Is it the Christian religion? Is it Islam? Is it what is it, brother? Is it the television? What would you say?
That's funny. You touched everything I was gonna say. It's our job. It's our job to teach our children. There's three reasons why we don't have the proper knowledge of ourselves. Number one is the school. You mentioned that. Number two is the religion, which is not African centered. And number three, the miseducation. So school is misinformation. The religious institutions are giving you misinformation, and the misinformation continues when you get home and you put the television on. So if those three things are your influences, then you're going to be misinformed. So it's not the school's job, it's our job. The school's job is to miseducate the children and give them false information. So they're doing their job, and they're doing a good job at it. It's our job to educate our children. Now, I think this is interesting. In 2015, when the children went back to school in September, it was the first time in the history of America that more children of color entered the school system than white children. Having said that, the curriculum in the school should reflect that changing demographic, but it's not. And so they're still continuing to teach the lie that Christopher Columbus discovered America. You cannot discover a place that's already being inhabited by people. And Christopher Columbus never came to North America where we are now. He got as far as the Caribbean, but they still say he discovered America. That's their job to tell that lie. It's our job as a people to not only educate our children ourselves, but become self-sufficient by having our own institutions. I think it's interesting how every other group of people have schools where they teach their culture and everything from their perspective. And we're the only community of people that don't have our own independent, black-owned, African-centered schools. So it's our job. And I think we need to do a better job at pooling and aggregating our money so that we can start those schools. And you talked about black business. We talked about group economics. I think it's important for us to support black businesses. And in turn, those black businesses can donate and help to fund the schools that we need to build. And so it's a circle. It's a circle. And it's our job to answer your question. It's our job to educate the children.
Nice, nice. You know, I was thinking about what you just said, that the businesses, we support the businesses in turn that are appreciative of our patronage, then give a little kick a portion back to the community. And I want to say to those watching and listening that it's important that we live in peace and harmony, that we have balance. We want peace and harmony. At the same time, there are times when we are going to have to take matters into our own hands, uh, as did the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army, the Revolutionary Action Movement. I can keep going on and on. You know what the Black Panther Party did? They had these liberation schools. They had the free breakfast programs. You know, they needed money for that, right? They couldn't go to the bank and get the loan from the cracker.
Okay.
So they would roll up on these businesses. They'd be like, "Yo, you ready to pay your liberation tax?"
Okay.
And they'd be like, "What you mean?" They'd be like, "You know, that liberation tax."
Right, right.
Family,
Pull out that
we
ratchet.
we gotta. I'm not trying to advocate anything foolish, family, but what I'm saying is that when you see that what you're doing isn't working, and you go back, practice Sankofa, and look in your history and see what other people did that was working to a point, something in you has to say, maybe we should consider other means and methods. That's all I'm saying, family. I'm not trying to get you in trouble with the white man. I just just want you to understand this is how you got to think.
Yeah,
You
no, that
know,
makes sense. That makes sense. And we see every community of people like, so for example, the Chinese have Chinatown. So they have Chinatown in New York, and they had this before you and I were born. They had Chinatown. They have Chinatown in New York. They have Chinatown in Philadelphia. Chinatown in Washington D.C. Chinatown in Atlanta, Georgia. Chinatown in Detroit, Michigan, Chinatown in Chicago, Illinois, Chinatown in San Francisco, California, clean across the country. They got Chinatown. They did that and created this for themselves. They didn't create that for us. Some of us go and shop in Chinatown once in a while, but they created Chinatown for themselves. In Queens, brother IJ, I don't know how much time you spend in Flushing, Queens, but the Koreans have taken over a major section of Flushing, Queens. The
Mm,
signs above the store are written in Korean. I'm gonna say that
mm.
again. The signs above the store are written in Korean. Therefore, they didn't create that for me and you. They created that for themselves. So every group of people is creating some kind of situation where they're becoming self-sufficient and they have their own communities and they spend money within their own community.
And they protect those communities. I want to be really clear. Chinatown got what you and I would call gangs. That's
Sure.
you're not gonna go up in there
And
acting
regulate.
up.
That's right. That's
Just to
right.
know
So
that.
so I said we need food, clothes, shelter, education, medication, and self-defense. You have to be able to defend your community. And so my thinking says if this works for every other group, why would it not work for people of African heritage? You familiar with Dr. Barbara Sizemore?
Oh yes, sir.
She said the most,
Elder.
yo, yeah, salute to her. She said the most powerful organizing force among humans is nationalism. It works for every other group. There's no reason why it wouldn't work for us. So you have people that are making excuses to not be black nationalists and not embrace this idea of black nationalism. And to me, that's illogical. If it works for every other group, why would it not work for us?
That's exactly right. There's a conspiracy, brother Ramessu, as you probably know. Our enemies and his Negro collaborators do not want our children to know anything about black nationalism. This is why our children right now, and let me be very clear, the white man has been successful. Give him his. Tell the truth. He's been successful. Our children right now, if they hear you go, oh, that person's a faggot, your kid will say, hey, Mom, you can't say that.
Right, right.
Your kid, I'm not making this up. They'll be like, you can't say that. You're a homophobe.
Mm,
But you can say nigga, 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 nigga all day, and they
right.
won't say a word.
Not
The
only that,
society has conditioned them to be defensive in one aspect and to be accepting in the other. So there's a conspiracy to push nationalism and Pan-Africanism aside. There's a whole group called ADOS
mm-mm.
that says we're not connected to Africa. You know, we the American descendants of slaves, and that's it. So we have a lot of work to do, you know, to
Yes,
spread this news of nationalism and Pan-Africanism. There's a lot of work to do. That's why, brother, your book is very important in this regard, family. It's very important. It's giving you that foundational knowledge. And it's not way over nobody's head. You don't have to read 18 dictionaries to go through the book.
that's
It's
right.
also it's not a dumb book either.
That's right.
But you don't have to go to the college just to decipher what he's talking about. You can read it.
Yeah,
The brother in the barber shop, the brother in the bar, the sister, single parent mom, you can read the book and get it. Very important.
absolutely. And that's important for us because the information is something that we need because people of African heritage in America, we're the most hated, mistreated, Jim Crow segregated, mass incarcerated people in the country. And so, in order for us to navigate our way through that, we have to renew our mind and our thinking. Something in our thinking has to change. And I think it's interesting that you brought up the use of the N word. I think it's interesting that the distribution companies that put the music in the stores that promote that word, they're not owned by us, they're owned by our oppressor. The radio stations that play it are not owned by us. Now, if there was music that talked about, harming, brutalizing, and killing members of another group, it would never see the light of day. But when it comes to us, our music is easily the most destructive music being put out by people that don't look like us. The artists are us, but the artists wouldn't have an outlet if the distribution channels and the radio stations didn't play their music. And so, if we don't own the stations and we don't own the distribution channels to put that music out, then we don't really have control of the music. And you would never see country music artists talking about harming, brutalizing, and killing other white people. You would never see that music, if it existed, and it doesn't, but if it existed, it would never make the light of day. But for us, this is what they're putting out for us to consume. And it's very important to understand that music videos and music and images on television, the language of the subconscious mind is images and sounds. And so ultimately the school system does not have as much control over the mind of the children as entertainment and the television and the music and so forth. And so I think that's important to note.
Propaganda. Marcus
Propaganda.
Garvey said something deep, family. Check this out what he said. He said, nothing you do will be successful if you don't understand and properly utilize propaganda. So that means that just as Ramessu said, there's propaganda that could be used against you, and you can develop propaganda for your interests to get black people to support independent black vendors, to get black people to wear natural hair, to get black people to say black is beautiful. That those are the results and outcomes of propaganda campaigns that our people waged, right? So we can take propaganda, images, colors, sounds, and text, and we could use it for our advantage. The red, black, and green flag, certain music, right? When you're on around Christmas, they playing jingle bells, and you ready to run out and buy something.
That's right.
You know, you just ate an 8-course meal, and you see the Big Mac, and now you talking about I want to get a Big Mac. It's propaganda.
That's right. That's right. And so it's almost to the point where we don't have control of our minds. And it was Stephen Biko that said the greatest weapon in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So if they can impact you psychologically with the commercials, with the music, with the television, with foolishness on the internet, then once they got your mind, they have complete control of you. You don't have to worry about. And that was Carter G. Woodson that said, "Well, you can control a man's mind. You don't have to worry about his actions because he's not going to think to do anything revolutionary to transform his condition and end the propaganda in the system. So they don't have to worry about us as long as we put that music up." And so I like that you said Brother Quabena is banging on the radio stations.
Oh
I
yeah.
think we need to launch a campaign to get them off the air. So
Oh yeah.
we go after the sponsors, we go after those people who are underwriting those radio stations and taking out ads and so forth. And it has to be very deliberate. We have to let them know, look, we're coming for you. This is destructive, and we're not going to stop until we bring you down. Remember, I said a steady drop of water could wear a hole in a rock. And Dr. Cabo always says it's not over until we win. If it has to be
Right.
multi-generational fight, it has to be a strategic and methodical fight, then that's what it has to be. But we got to bang on them until we can get them off the air altogether, because that's the only way it's going to change. And the people, the power of the people power is very important for us to understand that we have the power. A lot of us think we can't fight because the system is so big and so powerful that we don't have a means by which to fight, but that's not true. There are almost 200 other ways of, I hate to use the word nonviolent action, but there are 200 other ways to engage in creative guerrilla warfare, because ultimately what we're involved in is psychological warfare. You talked about propaganda, and this is something I mentioned in the book. Propaganda is number psychological warfare. So you're at war because of Hollywood movies. We tend to think of war as somebody shooting bullets and dropping bombs from an airplane at 30,000 feet. But war is social, it's political, and it's economic. And we can fight on all of those fronts. So if you want to get rid of the radio stations, it's not a problem. The people have to act in one accord and have sustained indignation. That means indignation is just a fancy word that means angry. You got to stay angry for a long enough time until you bring them down. And then you go on to the next target, whatever that is. But that's how you fight a war now.
And I think responding to what we were just saying, Brother Quabena has a comment. It says, "Right on until we win, and even then."
I
And
say,
he's part of a national movement. It's called the Those You Watching Clear the Airwaves Project. You can look it up, and they're banging on these radio stations. They're banging on these rap artists. They're banging on the black community. They're banging on the youth in different ways, but trying to raise consciousness to say, "Yo, these words do matter, man. The
absolutely,
ideas that we listen to over and over again do matter." So
absolutely.
check Brother Quabena out. He's part of a very important movement, Clear the Airwaves Project. And check him out on Facebook as well, so you can be part of that. One of the goals of our broadcast is to try to link our people up, so we can stop saying we don't do nothing, which is the biggest lie in the world. We got brothers and sisters, soldiers that's doing something all over this planet,
That's
family.
true. That's
You
true.
just don't know about
That's right.
them. Stop
So,
playing.
so like you said, like you were asking me about the outcome of the trial, and if you eavesdrop on the right wing talk radio, they were losing it after this verdict came out that this man was found guilty, and so they're acting surprised, and so they're pushing and promoting their propaganda. That's basically saying that this man's death wasn't the fault of the police or whatever the case might be. But even those people like them, I mean, we should go after them at some point as well.
That's right. That's right. Now, If there are no questions or additional comments, I don't see any at this time. I'm going to defer to our good brother Ramessu. If there is anything, any points, perspectives, information that you did not get to address that you'd like to address now before we close out, could you please take the time and do so, good brother?
Oh, most definitely. Forgive me for turning pages while the mic is open, but I think some of the key concepts and some of the key takeaways is the idea that as people of African heritage, the principal basis of our thinking and our frame of reference and our culture should be an African frame of reference and African culture. To me, that's logical and common sense. It says understanding your history gives you pride in yourself. It helps you to understand who you are. And that's a section of the book where I talk about history. Knowing your history is an essential part of human dignity. See, we don't love ourselves because we don't know ourselves. And so when all you've been taught is someone else's history, you're not going to have that love for yourself. So you're not really going to understand who you are. And that's a basic part of human dignity. You will have no dignity and you will lack the pride in yourself if you don't know your history. It says, okay, so as African people, group loyalty and collective achievement should be at the center of our philosophy and our thinking. That's important. I'm going to say that again. As African people, group loyalty and collective achievement should be at the center of our philosophy and our thinking. We talked about the Chinese with Chinatown, talked about the Koreans with Koreatown. Those groups have their communities because they have loyalty to the group. See, as African people, we've never been taught to have loyalty to the group. We've always been taught to have loyalty to the culture of the oppressor. And when you get nothing but a European-centered education, then you have sympathy for their agenda, none for your own agenda. You don't even understand that you should have an agenda. Okay, so this is important. We must start businesses and spend money with Black-owned businesses to build a Black economy and a Black economic base. Spending is what drives an economy. People of African heritage in America spend $1.3 trillion every year. Less than 3% of that money comes back into that community that spends the 1.3 trillion. So we have to begin to not only support Black business, and this is something Malcolm said years ago. He said we need to be re-educated about the importance of supporting Black business, and we also need to be re-educated about the importance of going into business. As it stands right now, we don't own enough institutions to be self-sufficient, and we should be about owning institutions, whether it's educational institutions, business establishments. We need to own more in an effort to be self-sufficient. Your very identity is connected to the language you speak. This is something I didn't touch on. Language is ideas and its concepts. As long as we're speaking English only, we're thinking in European ideas and in European concepts. Your identity is connected to the language you speak. When you are unable to speak your own language, it's not possible to retain your identity because your very identity is connected to the language that you speak. And so that's another thing we should push among ourselves as a people is learning an African language. Now, in the book, I propose learning Swahili. Now, out of all the African language, people say, well, why Swahili? Swahili is the most widely spoken African language on the African continent, and it's the most widely spoken African language outside of the African continent. So if you're going to learn any one, I think the most practical one to learn would be Swahili. And there are more study materials available on Swahili than any other African language. So that would make basic common sense if you just want to learn one practical African language that we can all speak to each other around the world. The concept of Pan-Africanism is an all-inclusive social, political, and economic ideology for Black people. I feel like when you say Pan-Africanism, a lot of people don't really understand what that means necessarily. So they might thumb their nose at it and not even really totally understanding it. It is the formation of a union that includes the entire African world community. I see this with other ethnicities, whether they be East Indian, Chinese, or whomever. Anywhere they find themselves in the world, they instantly have a bond and a connection. They have that solidarity because not only do they have shared culture, but they have shared language, shared identity. They're very clear about who they are. We're the only people that are still arguing over identity. I'm ADOS, I'm not African. We still are having those kind of ridiculous arguments. And most of those are just that. They're ridiculous arguments and they're based on ignorance. It's based on a very ignorant premise. Black nationalism is a social, political, and economic cooperation of Black people nationwide. Another thing, when you say Black nationalism, a lot of people are not even clear on what that means. So I try to make it very simple, put it in a nutshell. Black nationalism is a social, political, and economic cooperation of Black people nationwide. I don't think I can make it any more simplistic than that. You might be, a little bit more craftier with the words. You can make it simple, but I think that's very simple. A person should be able to understand that. And going back to what Dr. Barbara Sizemore said, in order for us to have that connection nationally, that cooperation, we got to have loyalty to the group. And
I want to say, so I want to jump in here, brother
so go
Ramessu.
ahead.
So a few things that you said. I want to speak of the last thing. You keep referencing Dr. Barbara Sizemore. Some people don't even know who she is.
That's true.
And they in the conscious, so-called conscious community, so-called Black power educated family. We got to do due diligence. We have to practice Sankofa. You can't go far ahead if you don't know the people that came before you. Because when you study the past, Dr. Adelaide Sanford, State New York Board of Regents, brilliant. Sharshay McIntyre, now deceased, brilliant. One of my judges, Dr. James Turner. These people are, to say brilliant is an understatement. These are people who did a lot of the things that we're talking about, our generation. I would make the argument that if you study our history, you'll see that our predecessors, I'm talking about our parents' generation and before them, outworked us, outproduced us, outthought us, out-theorized us, out-saved us, right? With less than we have. So we have to know these people. This is not just roll call. We got to really know these people because they came with something and they brought it in a way that galvanized people. Now, of course, there was other things going on in the world, right? These other external factors. But we really have to know when he says Dr. Barbara Sizemore, I want y'all to go to YouTube and look, type up Barbara Sizemore and hear this woman and see her, what she's talking about. Adelaide Sanford, I can list so many, but you really got to know these people. One thing I like about you, Brother Rammesu, in your book, I'm going to show it again. Your book, Fundamental African-Centered Thought, Fact, is that unlike many of the people I see today that think they did something new, think they the first one to talk about this or do this, you repeatedly throughout this book are naming people. Dr. Wade Noble said this. Dr. Amos Wilson said that. Francis Cress Wilson offered this. That's very important because what you're practicing, in my opinion, you're practicing that Sankofa. You're saying, look, I'm building on these people. What you're doing is an important work, but you're humble enough to say that my important work is built on the important works of these other people. You don't know how many times I've heard brothers and sisters act like the cooperative economics, they just thought that shit up. they just thought up revolution. They came up with the idea of African-centered schools. No, you didn't. And as I'm saying, if we go back far enough, you'll see that our ancestors not only had those ideas before us, but they executed them far better.
That's true.
So we're lacking something that we might get if we go back. We might get that missing link. Well, Brother Ramessu, listen, man, we thank you very much for your contribution. I really hope that people will go here, offthecornerinfo@gmail.com, hook up with our brother Ramessu, get his book. I believe it's $21. Is that right?
That's correct.
Spend that $21. Educate yourself. If you feel that you want these people, you know it all, great. Then give it to somebody who don't. Buy it, give it to them.
There you go.
All right, no excuse. Support our good brother. He took the time to put this work together, and he shows love and respect for his ancestors. So I rock with the brother just off the strength of that. Just off of that. You see, that takes a lot to be humble. Takes a lot, family. So, brother, I want to thank you for your contribution. We're going to stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Keep us updated on any new developments, particularly that audio book coming out.
Yes, most definitely.
All right.
I want to thank you for giving me a voice and allowing me to speak on your outlet.
Oh, absolutely, man. This is our platform. I don't own it. But one day, we might just own our own platform. So,
Absolutely.
man, listen, brother, thank you much. And we're going to stay in touch. Family, I want to say this to you all. We had a talk with Brother Ramessu today. He showed his book. He talked about his book, Fact, Fundamental African-Centered Thought. The book is very important. Every book is important for different reasons. Some books are important because it's real critical, makes you rethink things. Some books are important for this reason or that reason. To me, the book is important because it covers foundational knowledge. And I don't care where you go and what you do and who you know, there's certain knowledge you're always going to come back to. And this is the type of knowledge he has in the book. So, family, I really encourage you to go support that. You can go to Amazon. You can buy it for $21, right? And you would do that by looking up the book Fact. Put the ticker on the bottom, right? That's by Brother Ramessu Marie Amun. And if you search that title or by author, you'll come up to the book. And you can, as it says on the screen, go right to the Gmail. Hit the brother up directly and buy his book. Family, when we organize, when we believe in ourselves, when we know our enemy, his ins and outs, his weaknesses, his proclivities, right? When we have a Black liberation theology that we draw from that inspires us, when we save our resources and pool them, when we get over our fears and our uncertainties, I got 3 words. And those 3 words I always end are, we will win. Just a matter of time, family. Peace, Black Power, Wakusu, free the land. We got this, family. And we hope you will join us on May 1st when we'll be meeting with our brother Tiny. Nickname, of course. His name is Marion Frampton. Once the leader of chapter 14 of the Black Spades, talking about the importance of the Black Spades street organization and something that we can learn from what we call gangs or street organizations. Because they weren't founded to rob people, family. They were started to protect the people in the South Bronx. And he's going to break all that down. So, family, hope you will join us May 1st. In the meantime, I want to thank you all. And we hope you join us on May 1st. And see you later, family. Peace, Black Power.